Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and if you notice, I'm not wearing a winter coat or a sock monkey hat. I think spring's finally here, and I'm so super excited to show you how I turned this muddy pit of a side yard into this outdoor patio garden area. Now, if you've been following along for very long, you've probably heard me mention that we're living in a tiny garage apartment. So basically, a couple years ago, we bought 8 acres, put up a 30 by 50 garage, we split it in half, and my workshop is half, and we live in the other half. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but it was actually supposed to be a very temporary living arrangement while we built our real house next door to it on the property. However, as things often happen, life didn't go as planned, and we're about to spend our 3rd summer here. I was tired of basically not having anywhere outside to hang out, and so I finally just decided to turn this into a nice outdoor hangout spot that's currently a garden, but don't worry, all summer long I'm going to be adding pieces to this space so that we can turn it into not only a garden, but also a hangout patio area. I've partnered with my friends at the Home Depot and Vigoro to bring on spring with this project, and if you want to see how I turn this muddy mess into this hangout spot, let's do this. I had 2 goals with this project. The main goal was to expand our growing capacity and build a bigger, bolder, better garden in what was this wasted space next to the house. And the second was to create an outdoor space that we can actually enjoy spending time in. So the very first thing we needed was a little bit more privacy. So step 1 was adding a privacy fence along the back side of what will become our new garden patio. I kept this pretty basic and just made a straight privacy fence solid on the bottom with lattice on the top. I used 1x6 fence boards cut in half on the bottom, and 16 of those side by side is 88 inches. So I laid out my fence posts 88 inches apart and pulled a string around some stakes in the ground to make sure that I kept them straight when I dug the post holes. Then I recruited my dad to come over and help me dig 24-inch deep holes for each post to sit down into. Once we had the holes dug, we dropped the 2 end posts into the holes first and used a line level on a string to make sure that they were both level across the top. Then we filled those holes with concrete mix. Once the 2 outside posts were in place, we dropped the 3 middle posts in and leveled them all to the same line. If they were too low, we just filled it in with a little dirt, and if they were too high, we just dug out some more. Now, I'm definitely no professional fence builder here, so there may have been an easier way to do that, but basically we just got all 5 posts put in the ground in a straight line, level across the top, 88 inches apart, and level up and down. Honestly, that was probably the most difficult part of this entire yard makeover. At that time, we had just thawed out from a snowstorm and had a torrential rainfall 2 days before, so the ground was plenty wet. And I just left the concrete to cure as is with the moisture in the ground and moved on to the rest of the project. Now, I had already measured this area out and decided to make this garden space about 22 feet by 22 feet. While the fence post set up, I began prepping the ground. I used some heavy-duty landscape mesh to line the entire area that I was working on just to prevent weeds from growing up into our garden and into the rock and mulch. I laid this out and used garden staples to make just one giant square 22 feet by 22 feet, and then I had to come back later and fill in some spots where I got creative with the edging. Speaking of edging, once the mesh was in place, I used no-dig edging to outline the garden and to separate where I would have mulch versus dark rock versus the lighter rock. Now, if you saw my video about how I built a faux fence to hide my ugly well house back this last fall, you may remember seeing this edging before. It's super easy to install and it's super flexible, so you can just lay it out in any shape that you want. You literally just use a rubber mallet to stake the edging in place, no digging required. I was totally winging it here with my design, so I just kind of outlined the rough shape that I wanted the garden to take. Now, the back right corner was a high spot, and I decided instead of doing a bunch of digging and leveling that I would just use this spot as part of the design. I ended up using a planter in this back corner, laid on its side so that it looks kind of like it's pouring rock out into the garden. This is just a really creative way of being lazy and not wanting to dig out any more than I had to. Once the edging was laid out and I had a nice outline of the space, I started filling it up. So the first thing I added was 4 raised garden beds. I wanted something that was going to withstand the weather, so I picked out these powder-coated raised beds. They were really easy to put together, and once they were assembled, I just spaced them out evenly and did my best to level the ground underneath them to get them to sit flat. Since the ground was so wet, that was pretty simple. I just stomped around until they were level. After that, I called it a day and came back the next morning to finish the fence. I cut my 2x4 rails down to fit between the posts and drilled pocket holes into the ends. I know there are 1,000 ways to attach these, but pocket holes seemed easy enough, so I just attached 3 rails between each post. One toward the top, one about 22 inches down from that, and the other about 32 inches down from the middle. I used a level while attaching just to keep each board level so things didn't get wonky. You'll notice that it's pretty windy here, and this is where my camera blew over and I broke my lens. I would like to tell you that this is the first time I broke a lens on my 6-month-old camera, but it isn't. So if the next few clips look different, it's because I had to film with my phone for a while until my new lens came in the mail. Just bear with me, friends. Now, 1x6 fence boards usually come in 6-foot lengths. I didn't want a totally solid fence, so I made the top half lattice and the bottom solid fence boards. To save on material, I just cut these fence boards about 34 inches long, so I got 2 pieces per board. I also bought the lattice in full sheets and used a jigsaw to cut them in half and then trim them to length. Starting at the center of each rail, I screwed the solid boards in all the way across, making sure to keep them level up and down. And once the bottom boards were secure, I stapled the lattice pieces across the top. At that point, all that was left to finish off the fence was adding the post tops. The instructions say to use caulk to attach, but I just used exterior grade wood glue. Whatever works, works, right? Once the fence was complete, it was time to spread the pretty stuff. For this project, I used pond pebbles for the middle section, Mexican beach pebbles for the small area next to the house, and black mulch for the outside border and walkway. So if you see here, this is all the bags that I individually carried all the way from there to here, and then when my husband got home, we used the tractor to bring all of these other bags up. So once the bags were up here instead of way over there, things moved pretty quickly. I cut open and spread out all the pond pebbles first, but the sun set on me, so I had to come back and finish spreading everything out in the morning. I just used a metal rake to evenly spread out all the pebbles where they were going. Now, I almost added mulch here next to the house, but I just didn't want the mulch like touching the house, so I ended up using Mexican beach pebbles here just to give it some contrast between the pond pebbles, but also just to be able to use pebbles and not mulch. Once all the rock was spread, I had to go back and cut some landscape mesh to fit around the curves that I added in the mulch area, and once I had all of that covered, then I could add the black mulch. I'd like to tell you that this was the end of spreading rock and mulch, but I actually ran out of pond pebbles and had to make a Home Depot run for a few extra bags to finish up. While I was at the Home Depot, I also picked up some stepping stones to add to the black mulch walkway. I tried to casually walk and estimate my footsteps so that I could place these at a natural distance apart and set them in place in the mulch. I'm sure there's probably a more scientific approach to that, but this worked. Now at this point things looked really nice but had zero function. So I began adding garden soil to the plant beds so we can actually start growing some things. I filled all 4 garden beds with garden soil that will work great for the vegetables that we plan to grow here. And in the meantime, I received the final pieces to add to the garden, these elevated cedar planter beds. Now, one of the main things that I wanted in this space was a potting bench. I repot my indoor plants all the time and I make a huge mess doing it. So I wanted somewhere to keep all of my supplies and where I didn't mind making a mess, planting and replanting. I had actually planned to build my own potting bench, but when I got these raised beds and put them together, I decided that one of these would work perfect as a potting bench and for cheaper than I could have bought the wood to build one. And side note, they go together a lot quicker than I could have built one to put together anyway. So after I got all 3 of these put together, I got them level and filled 2 with garden soil to plant herbs and flowers in and left 1 in the middle to use as a potting bench. To finish things up, I added some little pots on the fence post and filled these barrel planters with soil. I did manage to find a few flowers locally, but right now it's slim pickings as it's still pretty early for flowers and planting in our area. But as soon as it warms up, these planters will be ready, and so will the rest of the garden. I'm so excited about this side yard makeover, our huge new garden, and that we'll finally have somewhere to spend some time in outside this summer. I'm definitely brainstorming some seating options to add to this space and possibly a swing or a fire pit too. If you're anxious to see what I come up with, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on those upcoming projects. And in the meantime, if you're interested in any of the products used in this makeover, be sure to check out the description below for links to everything you saw in the video. I hope this has inspired you to quit waiting for someday to build a better garden, bring on spring now, and start enjoying it. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!